Thanks so much, Anna. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here for the Women and Global E-Commerce conference today. We have an absolutely amazing lineup for you today. It's going to be really, really fabulous. So as Anna said, this event has been put on by the Department for International Trade in the Southwest, and we have over 200 businesses registered throughout the day today. So we are just, we're absolutely thrilled, we're absolutely fantastic to put on an event that is really going to help anybody, whether they're women or not, in global e-commerce. So my name is Charlie Garham, or Charlotte, as it says on the screen there, and I am a digital advisor for the Department for International Trade in the Southwest. And I work alongside my colleague Nigel, who does the same thing. Nigel's down at the bottom there. And together we essentially just help all Southwest businesses with anything to do with digital marketing and e-commerce here, just to help them export even further across the globe. I'm also joined today by a colleague of mine called Emma Jones. Emma has been an international trade advisor for the last couple of years up in the north, but actually she's joined us in the Southwest just recently. So Emma is a very welcome addition to our amazing team down here in the Southwest. Emma has a very specialist sort of like international role. She is a specialist in retail and e-commerce. So all three of us are here today to help you answer your questions. And like Anna says, if the questions that you have don't get answered today, we will take it offline and we will get back to you and make sure that your questions are answered. So we're going to start into the very first speaker that we've got today. So we have Judith McElhinney, and Judith is an e-commerce specialist for the Department for International Trade, and she works in central government. Judith actually has a variety of roles within e-commerce for the last 15 years, including working at Amazon. So Judith actually can't be with us live today, but we do have a video presentation from her just to let you know about everything that we do here at DIT. So let's take it away.
Good morning, and thank you for including me in today's great lineup. I'm really excited to talk to our audience this morning about how UK brands can leverage marketplaces for international growth. So I want to begin today's presentation by just reminding ourselves of the changes that have taken place in e-commerce over the past year. The acceleration of e-commerce around the world in 2020 has been undeniable and is pretty well documented. So in the UK, e-commerce penetration was at about 19% at the end of 2019. And you can see from this chart from the ONS how online retail underwent somewhere between 5 and 10 years of growth in just a matter of months last year. So as a percentage of total retail, it took e-commerce almost 10 years to go, let's say, from 10 to almost 20%. And then it shot up to, I think it peaked at about 32% in Q4 of 2020, but ended up for the entire year at 28%, which is still pretty staggering. And in very practical terms, that shift has meant that brands were forced to really rapidly change their strategies as a result of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So in Q1, in the first lockdown, it became very clear that businesses with the most robust e-commerce strategies in place would be best able to kind of ride out that storm. And then conversely, the pandemic really exposed the importance of selling through online channels and retailers that didn't have the right channels in place, and logistics in place suffered from the biggest losses. So since kind of early 2020, we've certainly seen a lot of companies pivoting towards a more omni-channel approach. Any kind of final holdouts who weren't going down that route already. So the key takeaway here is that in the current climate, brands really do need to diversify, to ensure their survival. And that means diversifying channels, so diversifying markets, and even operational structures. So globally, the picture that emerged is very similar to in the UK, with e-commerce booming across most major markets in 2020, or all major markets. A December report from Group M showed that globally e-commerce sales, and this is excluding grocery, which obviously really took off over the last year, but global e-commerce sales totaled 3.9 trillion for 2020, so it shot up to 17% of all global retail, excluding the grocery side. And the growth took place in all major markets, but was particularly pronounced, interestingly enough, in countries like Canada and Australia. I think was another one where online penetration was slightly lower before the pandemic hit. So I think it's fair to say the pandemic has just really accelerated the shift to online, and depending on which reports you read now, they're predicting that e-commerce will account for somewhere between 25 to 33% of global retail by 2024. So, where is the e-commerce boom going to take us, and what will it mean for your business? If we could talk a little bit about that. So even before coronavirus, e-commerce was redefining kind of how we shop, and I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has really just sped up or accelerated a trend that we were already very much seeing. So in 2019, for example, the total global retail sector was growing at about 6% versus e-commerce, which was growing at that time at 24% already. E-commerce, like I said, in 2019 accounted for 12% of total global retail, and fast forward a year to now, and it's jumped up to 17%. And like I just mentioned, various different analysts are predicting that it'll be somewhere between 25 and 30% within just the next 3 years. So I think it's accurate to say that e-commerce will continue to be kind of the main growth driver of retail over the next several years. In terms of number of online shoppers worldwide, we have just shy of 2 billion people who are actively shopping online now. In Europe, there's 430 something million active online shoppers. The US has 290 something million, and then China 850 million or so people actively shopping online. So what does that mean for brands and retailers? Well, number one, consumer behavior has changed irreversibly. It's not going back. And not only are we shopping more online, but online is also having a huge impact on our offline purchases. And with the vast majority of shoppers, for example, doing some research online, either before they go to a store to buy, or even while they're in stores kind of browsing. And even when we wave goodbye to lockdown, and we have a schedule for that, it will remain more important than ever for brands to have an omni-channel strategy, so that they're serving their customers both offline and online, and within online on multiple channels, so from kind of your own .com to also marketplace platforms. So now we can start to zoom in a little bit and look at the cross-border e-commerce opportunities specifically. And it's pretty clear from this little piece of data that you're seeing that e-commerce has revolutionized not just how we shop, but also where we shop. So this graph is showing us how the growth of cross-border e-commerce over the last 6 years. And you can see that it's grown steadily since 2014. Last year, so 2020, more than 900 million people around the world shopped online from countries other than the country where they live. So that's about 45% of all online shoppers in the world. And those cross-border purchases accounted for almost a third of global B2C transactions. So cross-border is absolutely huge. The most popular categories purchased cross-border include things like consumer electronics, and fashion and apparel is really big, cosmetics, beauty products, things like that. And far and away the most popular platforms to purchase from, the most popular online sales channels are marketplaces, the likes of Amazon, Tmall, Zalando, etc. So those marketplace platforms capture about half of all global e-commerce transactions. That's both domestic and cross-border, which is pretty staggering. So we'll look at some specific opportunities for UK brands. When you're prioritizing your cross-border e-commerce strategy or looking at markets, you may want to consider some of the markets that are highlighted on this slide. So cross-border has been and will continue to be particularly big in emerging markets where imported goods are expensive to buy, usually through the physical retail chains, and just selection could also be limited availability of the products that people want. So in markets like China and India, for example, you have this rapidly growing middle class of consumers who are really keen to buy authentic and high quality international branded goods. And China, of course, is the #1 e-commerce market in the world as well, and also the #1 market actually for cross-border e-commerce. The Middle East I've included here, and that might be slightly less obvious to some. So pre-pandemic, the e-commerce share of retail in the Middle East was a lot lower than other markets. It's about 3 to 4% in the GCC, but also growing a lot faster than the global average. And then throughout 2020, that growth has been really exponential, with platforms like Mom's World and Carrefour and UAE reporting 7 to 800% growth in the first half of last year. So there's very similar for international products in the Middle East, particularly UK brands are especially highly sought after. And again, limited online product selection from local retailers because the culture there has very much traditionally been kind of shopping centres. So that's created a very nice opportunity for international brands in that region. Europe is still our nearest and dearest neighbour, and Western Europe is home to 3 of the top 10 biggest e-commerce markets in the world, and the UK being biggest, and then Germany and France, so it still makes a lot of sense to trade in the EU. And then the US and Canada are obviously great choices for e-commerce, given common language and cultural ties and so on. And of course, the US is the second biggest e-commerce market in the world. Australia and New Zealand are also both very good options, so obviously English speaking as well. Even though they have relatively small populations, both markets are in the top 20 e-commerce markets around the world. And in the case of New Zealand, for example, just under 40% of everything that they buy online is actually purchased from cross-border sellers. And that's just down to lack of availability and selection in the local market. So if you have a sought-after brand, if you have competitive pricing, I think both of those markets represent a really good opportunity. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about how marketplaces facilitate cross-border growth and why they're an important piece of the puzzle. So if we look at their sheer kind of scale and reach, we've already mentioned how over half of all online purchases globally take place on marketplaces. Similarly, more than half of all cross-border transactions now take place on marketplace platforms, and 2/3 of us shop from a marketplace of one kind or another at least once a month. They've also become kind of Google's main rivals in terms of search. So a lot of shoppers are just going straight to a marketplace to look for what they need rather than just kind of bypassing the search engine altogether. And from a consumer perspective, this makes a lot of sense, right? So the marketplaces offer us a completely seamless service, a vast kind of selection of products, and then it's all a fully localized experience. So it's in your local currency, offering your locally preferred payment and delivery options that you expect to have, and all in your native language, wherever you happen to be shopping from. But from a seller perspective, it also makes a lot of sense to launch internationally via a marketplace. And I guess the most obvious reason is that scale and that reach again. So they offer instant access to vast audiences of kind of millions of engaged, trusting, ready to buy, motivated shoppers who are looking for products to buy. As a brand, it allows you to get up and running very, very quickly. It's almost a plug and play model because you're using their payment systems in a lot of cases, like Amazon FBA, using their proprietary logistics program. And you're benefiting from the fact that the marketplace is already fully localized, so you don't have to go through that process with your own website. And you also retain price control, of course, and you get a full retail margin less the cost to sell on that platform. So that's very beneficial versus, say, a more traditional wholesale route to market or using a distributor model and so on. And they provide a good opportunity to test local markets before you go down a more complete localization kind of route. So you can learn a bit about consumer buying behavior in each new market before you enter that market. And then finally, a really big one actually is that because you're entering new markets, customers may not be very familiar with your brand. But they do trust the marketplaces because these marketplace platforms are so consumer-centric and customer-centric, have great service and so on. And so you can really kind of piggyback off that trust when you're entering a new marketplace to get those all-important initial sales. So I'd like to show you now a few of the platforms that DIT is working with. And first up here is the Market, which is a platform that was launched in New Zealand in 2019, I think it was. It's a very curated, very nicely designed lifestyle platform. It was launched by the biggest retail conglomerate in New Zealand. And what makes the Market particularly attractive for UK brands? Well, obviously New Zealand is English speaking. They have a strong push for British brands. Despite having a relatively small population, there's about 500 million people, same as Ireland, or sorry, 5 million, not 500. There are 3.9 million people actively shopping online. So even though it's very, very small, it's one of the top 20 e-commerce markets in the world. They shop online a lot. And like I mentioned in an earlier slide, coming up to half of everything that they buy online is from international sellers. So another big benefit is, of course, that you have cross-seasonality with the UK. So you can retain your full margin for more of the year by selling full price in the Southern Hemisphere versus discounting your products in winter or summer and in the UK. So that's a nice one to check out. And then the second one that I want to show you, completely different, is a B2B platform called Anchor Store. So Anchor Store connects brands with over 10,000 buyers now, I think, across Europe. So as the brand, you remain in complete control over kind of which brands you want to work with, which buyers, but their network includes boutiques, fine food stores, and just different types of independent retailers in 8 or 9 different European countries. They will give you guaranteed payment on delivery for your wholesale orders. So Anchor Store takes on the non-payment risk on behalf of the brand. There's no fixed cost to set up on this channel, so setup is free, there's no monthly fee. The commercial model is essentially that Anchor Store takes a 20% commission on the first order that you get from any individual buyer, and then subsequently they'll take 10% on follow-up orders from those same brands. So it's very comparable to using a sales agent for your wholesale sales. They will also cover your shipping costs on all of your orders, so you can use their logistics account to get those goods to the European customers. Anchor Store is interested in UK sellers supplying food and drink, fashion, home and living products, beauty, kids, so lots of different categories. So that's a really nice platform to check out. And those are just a couple of examples. There's several more showing on your screen here. So as part of the e-exporting program, GIT works with over 50 marketplaces, and we can connect you with all of those channels. But just to point out that there are hundreds of marketplaces around the world, and they all represent kind of a unique channel of demand and unique audiences. They offer unique USPs, sometimes operating in very specific product verticals, like Mano Mano, for example, which is a marketplace for DIY products. So there's lots of options to look into, and DIT has special deals with a lot of these marketplace platforms that you can benefit from when you apply to sell with them through our e-exporting program. So I'm going to wrap up soon, but I just want to tell you a little bit more about the e-exporting program and the support that's available for your companies. So our program's been around for 6 or 7 years now. There are 4 key services that we offer. The first is those marketplace partnerships that I've just been talking to you about. So we currently partner with 50 marketplaces around the world, both B2C marketplaces and B2B marketplaces. We have a tool called Selling Online Overseas, which allows you to go on and find and identify marketplaces that might be suitable for your business, and I'll show you that on the next slide. We run great promotions with our partner platforms. So this is where DIT negotiates merchandising space, usually on the platform homepage, and we'll run a campaign over, let's say, a 1-week time period that drives traffic to the UK brands that are selling on that platform, and that's completely free of charge for UK brands to take part in. And then finally, what I think is our most useful service is our e-commerce advisors. So we have e-commerce advisors in every region around the UK, and they can work one-to-one with the company and help you with your international e-commerce strategy. We can also connect you with our international trade advisor network and embassy support in, I think, 108 countries around the world, who can help with things like overseas market research, trade missions, which are all, of course, digital at the moment, meet the buyer events and things like that. And we also do lots of webinars, workshops, masterclasses, and so on, run across the UK and various partners. So on your screens now is the Selling Online Overseas tool, which I mentioned, and this is basically our marketplace finder. It was the first government service of its kind when we launched this a few years ago, and it allows UK exporters to access over 50 marketplaces currently. That number is growing all the time. So you can search the tool, as you can see, you select your product category and the country that you're interested in selling to, and we'll show you a list of marketplaces that are potentially suitable. You can drill down into the details for each platform and read about how they work, how big their audience is, basically all of the details on that individual channel. We have preferential deals with many of the marketplaces, including things like reduced commissions, marketing packages, and so on. And you can apply directly from DIT to those channels. So the marketplace has given us a set of criteria that their sellers need to meet. So when you apply, your application will come to DIT, we'll make sure that you meet the marketplace criteria, and then we provide a direct introduction. And if you don't meet the criteria for some point, we'll let you know kind of why that is and what we can do about it. So I've included here just a little very brief case study of one of the brands that we helped a couple of years ago. This was a brand called Maxwell Scott Bags, which hadn't previously sold on marketplaces and started to do so, and their sales grew by 300%. And they actually ended up bringing in ahead of marketplaces because they saw so much potential within this channel. And you will find lots more case studies if you go onto the great.gov.uk website. And finally, I think this will probably be shared with you after the event today. So this is just how you can get in touch and take advantage of this support. So you can visit great.gov.uk. If you Google selling online overseas, the marketplace finder will come right up. And I've encouraged you all to follow us on Twitter at the handle on the screen. We'll post there about events that we're running, new marketplace partnerships that we have, and so on. And you can email our team inbox at e-exporting@trade.gov.uk. And you can also use the link shown here if you'd like to request a meeting or a call, or a Zoom call at this stage with your local e-commerce advisor or international trade advisor. So that is all from me, and thank you all very much for listening, and hope you enjoy the rest of today's event.
Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you in the next session. If you would like to leave this session and then join the next link, then we'll get on to the next speaker.